The reason I put this together was because just recently I was teaching a class about structures and I realized so much has changed in the last sort of even just 18 months. And I really wanted to update that material. And I got to thinking that really I needed to speak to more people. So I kind of gathered some data from people who are, from clients, from people who come on my courses, from my own observations, a bit of research to see really what the current state of affairs is and what could we do to improve it in terms of the way that we structure our organizations, specifically really around product or service delivery. And what came out of it was this presentation. So hopefully this will be of use and of interest. Thought that we'd start off with, where are we? What have we seen? What's the history of this? And when I started in organizational change quite some time ago, pretty close to 2 decades really ago, and even as much as 10 years ago, before Agile really had such an impact on the way that we deliver things, these were the types of organizations that we were in, or I was in, very much command and control, mostly the matrix organization. People would structure things around projects. So we would pull people together for a specific endeavor, and they would stay together for the duration of whatever it was we were building, and then we would disband, and perhaps people would move around. Perhaps they would have multiple projects that they were working on in percentages, etc. So this is kind of just a nod to the old history, and I'm sure that many of you here may well still work in organizations that are heavily hierarchical and matrix driven. And so this is kind of just a real nod to that, but we'll be moving on from this. So enter kind of the world of Agile and these various frameworks that came along, have been around now really for 10, 15 years. And some things here you'll recognize, of course, the Scaled Agile framework, I'm sure we could run an entire series of meetups just on the Scaled Agile framework, but we're not going to really be looking at that in much detail. DevOps has been a huge influence on the way things have been delivered. The beginnings of trying to get rid of these skill-based silos. So dev passes it to test, passes it to ops, really trying to bring that together so that we've got more cross-functional teams. We've got, of course, down the bottom here, the Spotify model, which I'm sure Henrik Nyberg will probably wishes he'd never published that video all those years ago, but has been very useful for people to get these concepts and to take out, has changed the way that we think about organizations and the way that we structure things. So again, really a nod to moving from those matrix organizations, in taking some of these agile ideas and rolling things forwards. So I'm not going to spend too much time on these because I'm sure many of you here will have done these to death and know these inside out. So I'm going to move on. So this, there's a talk which Craig Larman, some of you will know Craig, he's the creator of Large Scale Scrum. He came and did a talk with us in 2017 at Adventures with Agile. And it was a very long talk, it was about an hour and a half long. But there's a little part of that which I'm going to steal from Craig. So this is really it's his talk, but it's really only it's about maybe 5-10 minutes, and I've enhanced it and changed it and added a few things. And this really for me was it was so well delivered that I think that it's worth repeating some of that here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw. So this is why it's a bit of a blank slide. So this really was about the problem with the way teams are set up to deliver products and services now. And I think that this gives us a good place to start because we want to look at why are we changing? Why do we want to change the way that we structure things if things are working fine? I'm not an advocate of change for change's sake. I really believe that in making things better, in which case we want to know where we're at. And so this starts, so some of you may recognize this. So we're going to start off with some teams. And in this instance, for this small part of the talk, we're going to start off with these 9 teams. And these teams have a bunch of people in them. So I'll just add some team members into our group. Now, these teams are what we call silo teams. These are teams who are unable to produce a finished feature or a finished part of the product on their own. They require each other to be able to deliver something to the customer. And that's the definition of a silo, a component, or a feature team. So this is by definition, this is where we are. And many organizations are working like this. So this might be a search team. It could be the payments team. It might be the database engineering group. So there's lots of ways to carve up people that are not full teams that can then deliver something to the customer. And that's by definition what these are. So we're going to start with these 9 teams. And typically these teams normally have a team lead in them. So we're going to draw our team lead at the top here. And this person typically holds the integrity of that team together. Perhaps they represent that team in meetings where there's cross discussions. Now, what's the problem with silo teams? Really, the problem comes down to one word, and that is dependencies. Dependencies between these teams to deliver something. And dependencies, as we will see, create all sorts of problems. And this is really the crux of where the challenge comes in most modern organizations. So let's say this team has to deliver something. Right? So let's take a backlog. Let's imagine that we now have a backlog and we're working in an agile way. So we've got a lovely, beautiful backlog of stories, perhaps epics that have been broken down. They've been prioritized by customer value, by reducing risk. And we've got this lovely backlog of work and it's prioritized so that we can work from the top and we work downwards, with the one at the top being the most priority to work. So we take the one off the top and we say, right, which teams can deliver that item? And so we have a look and we say, well, look, these teams can deliver that item. Fantastic. Those teams get on and they're delivering away, working together, collaborating well together to deliver that item. The second item, let's take the second item. Well, that second item requires these teams to work. And the third item perhaps is these teams. So it's pretty obvious to anyone looking at this that these first teams down the bottom here are going to be fine. But then we get to here and we're going to start seeing a bottleneck. And so what happens is this team is now going to have to prioritize their work. And that means that they're going to need a queue or a backlog. So then we have to introduce the idea of a team backlog. And all of these are going to need a team backlog because they can't do all the work at once because they're now under pressure. They're on the critical path because other teams are now waiting for them to deliver. So we have introduced delay, wait times between teams. So you can imagine this is just 3 items with 9 teams. If you've got a very large organizations, you may have 20, 30, 40 teams, and we haven't got 3 items working through this. We've got hundreds and hundreds of items, and this gets very messy very quickly. So what do? Let's have a look at the cycle of how what we normally have to put in place to support these teams being able to do this work. So the first thing in our cycle is that we're going to need somebody to define what this work is. And that's typically somebody like a business analyst or some kind of person who's client facing, or perhaps talks to the business person who is going to figure out what these teams are doing. And so this team at the beginning here, perhaps is, let's call them the BAs, the business analysts. And these business analysts, they take client requirements and they change them into some kind of technical spec or technical explanation. Now, we can't give that to the teams because the teams only work on a small part of it. So typically, we're going to need somebody to really work this through. So we're going to have some technical architects or even enterprise architects who then produce some kind of matrix, which, and I've done this role many years ago, is to really analyze the technical estate of what we're working with and figure out which one of these teams is going to be able to deliver what part of it. So we're splitting up this business requirement into various parts which that these teams can deliver. And this matrix really details which teams are going to be delivering what. And perhaps I see this less and less these days, but we might have systems architects who then go down deeper into that and provide some detailed specs for these individual teams. Often I'm not seeing that now. Often the teams are doing that, but I put that in there anyway. So now we get to the point where the teams can actually work on it. So these are our 9 teams. These teams will now start work on whoever gets that piece of work. And this is what we're seeing in the big picture. So these teams, they do a piece of work. they can't test the whole feature because they're only working on one part of it. And so typically then it may have some automated testing. Hopefully now, 2025, we've got people who are actually writing tests for their codes before they write the code. But typically, still, I'm seeing they're passing this off to a bunch of testers. Perhaps this is nearshored, offshored, somewhere around the world. So they're passing this off again to someone to test this. Now, then these bits get tested. Perhaps they go backwards and forwards between the developers, and then we're going to get to integration testing. Now, someone has to integrate these things together. It can't be any of these teams because these teams are, by definition, silo teams. So we have a bunch of integration testing going on. Perhaps that passes, perhaps it goes back to the teams, but then maybe we get some client testing. Maybe we've got a UAT testing team. Maybe we've got then, we then go into ops. If we've got ops, someone who then deploys this, who has the security clearance to talk to the live servers, etc., and off it goes. We have all of these teams, and these teams have been created specifically because of the choice of having silo teams. So why does this matter? But before we go on to why does it matter, there's one team missing from this. In fact, there's two things missing from this. We're just talking about one piece of work going through these teams to enable it to be finished, which then gets split up through the development process and put back together again. Actually, as we discussed, there are hundreds of pieces of work going through this, so somebody needs to keep track of this. So, of course, we're going to need some kind of other team, and that other team is typically the PMO. The PMO's job is to keep track of all this and make sure everyone keeps pushing along, getting them along so that we're trying to reduce these bottlenecks. And the PMO is born to manage this. And the PMO is necessary and needed in a situation like this because no one else is there tracking this work through this big system. So we have this many people. And the reason why this is a challenge to start with is because if we imagine how much capacity we've got, let's say that this is the pipe of capacity, and capacity really is the number of days multiplied by the number of people, the number of useful hours in the day multiplied by how many people we've got. And what we've done with our big budget for this organization is we've said, right, all these people down here, that takes up that much budget. And these people are enabling these developers to create work. So already we've practically halved our budget because we've only got half the people who are actually writing code that is resulting in customer value. So now we've got this kind of small piece of the pipeline, small piece of cost here. And what we've done is we've essentially prioritized each one of these teams. So let's call this, if this was the search team, this team at the top here, there's, say, 8 people in this team, a nice, healthy number of people. We've said 8 people in our pipeline here are on search. That's a prioritization decision. The next team on database, whatever, that's this team. That is another prioritization decision. So what we've effectively done is we have prioritized what work we're going to be doing by choosing silo teams, by choosing platform teams, by choosing anyone who is fixed by what work they can do. So our lovely backlog here, which we're taking off in priority custom order, which we've spent many hours learning how to cut up stories, create amazing, organized, prioritized, beautiful stories, gets carved up, chopped up, pushed through this system based on the prioritization that we chose when we employed people and put them in those job roles. And so things do not come out in the order we expect. In fact, they come out in very different orders. And as a result of that, our poor project managers or our POs, our program or product managers, whatever we call them these days, product owners, we're looking for more and more sophisticated tools, more Jira plugins, anything we can to try to figure out how on earth do we get this stuff out on time in the order we said when we promised it to the business. And that simply cannot happen because we've already prioritized work based upon how we employed people. So all of these people here, plus all of these other categorizations leads to us unable to prioritize work. That's the first thing. So what else problem have we got? So as this work goes through, we see that we've got a big bottleneck in this team here. So what do we want to do? Typically, if we've got a bottleneck like this, most people are going to say, well, why don't we just move people over from these other teams? Makes sense, right? But unfortunately, that doesn't happen because we've got team leads at the top who are protecting the integrity of our teams. We believe in long-lived teams. These teams are specialists in their areas of technology, in the technology stack. And so typically what we do is we staff up. And that team then gets the people they need to manage that bottleneck. But that bottleneck is temporary because the teams aren't shaped around what shape of work we're getting. They're shaped by specialism and silo mentality. So when the work changes and now this team is the priority, we staff up again. And as a result, we end up with organizations like the Bank of America, who has something like 80,000 developers, or Barclays, last count I saw, 49,000 developers. So we've got these big organizations with tens of thousands. Imagine what you could do with 10,000 developers. The mind boggles, but yet we have these huge, great big organizations with massive amounts of people, mainly because they've staffed up and staffed up and staffed up based upon these component models. So we've got this idea of staffing up. The next thing we look at is what happens to the people who are working in these teams that are not on the priority path. Well, we look down the backlog and we're looking for the first piece of work that this team can do. And sure enough, there it is. That team can now work on that piece of work. So this team starts working on low priority work. Now, for that team, I've seen those teams, I've worked with those teams. They think that's the most highest priority work that there is. And I've seen teams working on low priority work, low down in the backlog, that are pulling late nights, weekends, etc., to get this work done. And yet, really, when you look at it from a portfolio perspective, nobody cares. Incidentally, because people are working on low priority work, and typically organizations are optimized for being busy, we don't like people sitting around doing nothing, then we're going to want to make sure that everybody is working to their capacity, which typically means that these teams are going to be adding complexity into the code base, into the product. And complexity means more errors, more bugs, more delays, more time it takes to write things. So we're having overly complex code, that low priority features are being prioritized. We've got large handoffs and delays, staff up problems where we're getting more and more people, which again adds to complexity. We've got no ability to prioritize, or at least we think we have, but what comes out isn't what we prioritized. It comes out because we have an implicit in prioritization based upon silo-based teams and this mentality. So why would we do this? Why would we optimize an organization around silo-based teams? And the reason came about was because we believed that this creates quality. It creates people who work together on the same things. We put them together so they can come up with the same ideas and come up with good ideas around how to solve the problems which are common to them. Now, the problem with that idea is that pretty much the worst thing you can do with a developer is stick them in a team with the same people working on the same code for years on end. What we're really looking to do is expose developers to new ideas, new people, new things. And if we look at some of these codes, and if you are a developer or you've worked in tech, then you'll probably have heard the conversation many times before where somebody says, "Oh, don't touch that piece of code, leave that one alone." Or you'll basically have this thing where somebody new comes into the team and they say, "Oh, I know it's a mess, but if you keep working on it, keep looking at it, don't worry, eventually it all becomes clear." And that person then basically gets adopted into these bad coding practices, and we end up with the pattern, a big ball of mud. And so we end up with these terrible code bases. And mostly, if you look at code bases, if you look at the code, you'll see that most code is pretty poor, even now. So this is why. So this is pretty much where we are in many organizations, even now, which surprises me because we've known about this problem really for the last 15, 20 years, but here we are. So this is the state of silo teams. So this is what we want to try and avoid. And typically what happened when Agile came along was we didn't like this. This was a mess. How are we going to get this stuff out? So we wanted to do Agile. So what happened when Agile came along was, right, we're going to go Agile, we're going to be Agile, whatever, however you want to phrase it. I'm trying to find a decent color that I haven't used before. What about this purple? Let's see how that goes. So what we said was we've got all these backlogs. I'll just draw the rest of these backlogs in because all the teams have their own backlog. So we need someone to manage that backlog. So let's get a product owner. So Scrum said product owner. So we got a product owner and we put these product owners in. And if you get a really ambitious product owner, maybe you get one product owner between two teams. But we've got a bunch of product owners. And then we said, well, we need a Scrum master. So let's add a Scrum master in. Now, sometimes we can't really afford one Scrum Master per team, so let's get some developers to do that part-time. So we maybe have a few developers who do Scrum Mastery part-time, and maybe we've got, one Scrum Master in a few teams. And we want to relabel some of these as, say, Agile PMO, the Agile BA, and the Agile Technical Architects. And we've done it. We've gone Agile. They're all managing their backlogs. They're all working in sprints. And we've got these people here working in sprints. And that's the depth of the agile transformation which I'm seeing in most organizations. And we can see that by this, it doesn't matter how many Scrum Masters you've got, it doesn't matter how many product owners or how good your product ownership is, you are never going to get your prioritized adaptability value to your customer in an organization set up like this. Agile is meaningless. Agility cannot be solved by adding in product owners, scrum masters into team structures that are silo based. So apart from sort of leadership, opening leadership minds to seeing things differently, which I think unlocks this, this to me is the biggest problem that organizations face, because good product, good leadership is still secondary if you've got if this team structure set up. You need those things, absolutely. Without good product sense, without good business sense, without good leadership, we're not really going to be going anywhere. But even if you have those things, you're going to get stuck if you've got silo teams. So that's the bit that I wanted to share and draw with you. So then I wanted to sort of have a look now. That's kind of the situation I see many people facing in their organizations. And so, what do we do about it? Where do we go from here? And so for a while, I've been looking at, where are we? So some of you may have come across team topologies. So this has been a thing that's been around for the last couple of years now. Matthew, Manuel, some great things in their book and some good things coming up. But I wanted to pull this apart a little bit. So, and just have a look at some of these things, because I see organizations embracing this as the next thing. And we've already seen SAFe as the next thing. We saw Scrum as the next thing. We've seen all these things as the next thing. And I really just want to put a little bit of a spotlight on team topologies just for a few minutes. This stream-aligned team is really what I'm interpreting as being what agility was meant to be, where you can take an item off the backlog in its entirety, complete it by that team, and deliver it to the customer, get feedback on it, and adapt as you go. So I see the streamlined team, and stream meaning value stream. So this a team can produce and is the value stream. And if we just remember, I'm not going to go too much into this, but if we just have a quick refresher on what a value stream is, the value stream really originally came from Lean, which was idea, lots of people delivering on that idea in a sequential way until the customer has it. And the purpose of the value stream was to optimize the organizational structure until you had single piece teams, which is what the idea originally came from Toyota, which was one team can produce any feature and deliver that to the customer. That was the optimal agile team structure. So that's how I see this stream team. So an enabling team is somebody who is not on the value stream, who is enabling the team to do something. Perhaps these are the team which is, you can think of HR, for example, as an enabling team. Now, enabling teams are fine as long as they do not create a dependency. If it is just things that are working away in the background, improving the developer stream, great, awesome. But too often, these enabling teams are actually really just component teams. And it very much fits in with either a complicated subsystem team, which is very much what we looked at with the nine box diagram, and a platform team is exactly the same in my mind as another silo team. So really, and unless there's no dependencies, these three are just silo teams, which is what we're moving away from, which we know that we've seen the problem of what happens with silo teams. There is no agility, there's no ability to deliver the customer in any type of priority order. So that's these three, unless there's no dependencies with the enabling team. That's the caveat. So these interaction modes, collaboration, X as a service, and facilitating. Collaboration was where you have teams coming together to collaborate on a feature or something that you're delivering to the customer, some upgrade or new feature or whatever it is. This is not necessary between team to team if you had a pure one-piece team. So we rarely have that in the complex world that we live in the big organizations. But I see this collaboration working when we come to talk about communities of practice and how we align. I'll share as we go on. I'll share what communities of practice are in my mind and how they can really enable delivery. So collaboration really is a good approach in terms of how do we work together, how do we build architecture, how do we make sure we've got consistent UI, how do we build things across teams which need to be consistent. So collaboration, yeah, great, awesome. Who can argue with collaboration? X as a service is the idea that you've got a service with a well-defined API that all the other teams can then pull into. This is just another silo team, unless that X as a service doesn't change, or changes so rarely that it doesn't create dependency. So it's all about this word dependency. So in my mind, X as a service is not an interaction mode. It's just another covert way of hiding another silo team. And facilitating in this model is really about how do we facilitate away from silo teams back to a stream-aligned team. So this was about sharing expertise so that we can become T-shaped people, or we've got this full stack developer type approach. How do we move to the place where we can optimize for flow rather than our silo-based expertise? So this was my take on this. I just want to be careful really with using these as blocks, because we don't want to be building the same dysfunction that we already have. And really we want to be using these to enable moving towards some kind of stream-based or delivery-based approach where the team can deliver anything off a backlog. What is the models? Not so much about how we're structured, but where is the power? Where is the power structure in our organization, and how does that power flow to get stuff done? So one model, which we've seen, I'm sure you've all seen this, IT as a service to the business. And this is very much IT is separate than, but a service to the business. So that's one model. We've got the project model. We talked about this earlier, where we grab people, we put them in a thing, and very much this is about numbers. It's about answerable ultimately, even if it's not directly to the CFO. It's about numbers. It's about money and pushing those projects through. Feature teams are is something which I think is very close to the silo model, where you've got multiple teams being stakeholders, but this could be a feature team, could potentially be a single piece or delivery team to the business. Really depends on whether there's any more dependencies again between the feature teams. And then these two at the bottom are very similar: sales-driven or marketing-driven product development, which is coming really from how do we optimize the sales pipeline or the marketing pipeline. And so it's really delivering for that sales process. And there's pros and cons with those. And most organizations have some kind of sales-driven process because we optimize for sales. So we'll come on to some of these. So I wanted to now look at this model, which is the model which I think is probably the best option that we've got in terms of how do we design. Now, I've taken this from what I've seen developing in the product space. So we started off with this idea of the product owner. I think that that word has is still around. People are still product owners, but I think that many organizations now are moving towards the word product manager. I think probably that people want to still be in the management hierarchy, and a product owner didn't seem to fit into that. So, product manager seems to be the term that we have taken on board. And we've got our product engineers and product designers for experience. Now, I stole some of, well, actually, I built upon a risk model which I've been using for a few years, and I've stolen some words out of a great book called Transformed by Marty Kagan. So I borrowed his, and it's a great book. Definitely recommend getting that if you haven't got it. If you're into product, if you're interested in how product works, it's quite high level, but some great terms in there. So I've stolen these words from his book because I really liked the simplicity, which built and made my risk model just a little bit easier to see. And what we've got here, if it's business to business, these are the risks that we want to look at. So value based, are we building the right value as the customer want it? Viability, can we actually build it in the time? Usability, even if the customer needs this thing and we can build it, can they actually use it? Do they like it? Do they want it? And the feasibility, can we afford it? Can we actually technically do this thing? And so with B2C, you can kind of combine these two, value and viability, into desirability. Does somebody actually want this thing? Are they going to buy it? And really the split here between these two is that in business to business, B2B, often the person buying the thing is not necessarily the person who uses it. And so some of these things get split out. So why is this important? Why am I even talking about this in team structures? Is because if we start thinking about product and about what it actually takes to make a business successful, then our team structures can start optimizing around that. And this is where I think that why things need to spin on their head. Rather than being IT led and how we organize things around the typical Conway's law, or organizing things around infrastructure, or infrastructure follows team structures, what we want to be thinking about is how do I create products and services in the right way, and who has got the power to be able to make priority decisions so that we can optimize teams around how do we prioritize things so that we can get the right priority out in the order that we expected them to be in. And so that's really where this comes from and why I've added this in here. And so there's a slight split here between product leader and product manager. The product manager is what I would have in Agile terms called the product owner, the person who is prioritizing work on a day-to-day basis. And I've always thought of the product owner as being ultimately an entrepreneurial spirit, somebody who is really taking ownership of delivering this product, making money for the business, creating value for customers, reducing risk. And so this is the day-to-day working. The product leader may be portfolio based, but really what their job is to coach, manage social risk about how people get on, use for hiring and support of their staff. How do I make the product managers and the product experience better? So let's now look at let's now look at this model. So this model I've been using for literally years, but I've upgraded it and updated it over the last week or so. And I'll show you some of those updates. Now, this model originally was based around some of the structures that came out of the conversations of that 9-box model. Some of the ideas came from Craig Larman and Les originally, but it's long since built upon that to be something else. So just a nod to those early contributors to this model. So the idea here is that these are teams of the product engineers, product designers who are building features for customers. And they can take anything off of this single backlog and deliver to the customers. And this team structure here is great for flow, because what we're doing is we're taking an item off of the backlog. They can deliver that backlog item, and we have shared code repositories where people can pull off of that. And so there is no search team that this team over here has to wait for, because if there's some code that needs editing in the search part of the code, they can go in and they edit it, and there are rules around the quality of the code, and you can build this into the repository so that there are the right approaches. Integration testing is very important in this model. You'll notice that we've got a single entrepreneurial product manager now, which is working closely with stakeholders, it's working closely with the business, and uses product data to prioritize. And this is really where I think AI now can play a huge role, because we've got huge amounts of product data. Well, many organizations have many large amounts of product data to do with everything from pricing to usage to features and in interactions and how people are working with the system. And so now AI can summarize that very nicely. So there should be some real AI systems in place to help the single entrepreneurial product manager. Over here, we've got the product leader supporting this group. And we've got the product engineers and product designers, which make up these teams. Nothing new there particularly. This CRM function here is really important, because what we have here is, with this model, who do customers talk to? In the old model, if they wanted something to do with search, they knew exactly who to call. They call the search person. But now any one of these people could be working on the search screen. So we have a kind of CRM so that people here know who to talk to, who their customers are. And when somebody calls up, customers know who to talk to, vice versa. And then you can have customer representatives. And this works quite nicely. And that CRM could be anything from a Salesforce installation to an Excel spreadsheet. To build consistency across these teams, we've got community of practice, which is really around learning, governance, alignment, and innovation and growth and consistency. And again, AI here is massively important in terms of building coming up with new things very quickly, documentation, code examples, etc. So this model is, at its core, is removing dependencies between teams. That's the purpose of it. And when you remove dependencies across teams, you lose consistency and everybody working to the same architectural design. And so you gain that back by creating a community of practice. So this product operating model has things baked into it which are not absolutes, and this is where I want to come on to next. And this is really the thrust of this talk, which is really leading to this point, because a lot of what I've talked about is not new. A lot of this has been around for many years, and I've been teaching some of these things and implementing these single backlog, multiple team organizations for quite some time. But what's been missing is really this this idea of complexity. And this is coming on to the last part of this talk now. So I know I've been talking for a while, so thank you for your patience. This part is where I think is missing. And this is the soft part, the vertical development, the bit that nobody really can talk about, has vocabulary around. And the key part here is really that when we see truth A and truth B, and both are true, but they are opposite. And the reason why this is important is because in complexity, this is called a paradox. And paradoxes happen all the time. And we need to be able to relax ourselves and hold both truths in place at the same time. So if we do that, a new wisdom emerges and we create a dynamic tension. And I'll give you some examples. Working from home is great for flexibility. Absolutely true. Way better to work from home. Working in the office means that we see people, we create culture. We've known in the Agile world that face-to-face communication beats video conferencing every time. Way more effective if we're working in the office. Both things are true. So how do we hold both of these things in truth at the same time? And many people find this very difficult. Another one is autonomy versus consistency. Autonomy is the ability to choose how you work. Consistency means you have to align with others. Both are true, both are needed. How do we hold the balance of tension between these two things? And so I want to explore these areas, just 5 areas. We're going to have these, actually 6. I added one in at the last moment. 6 areas of these tensions. I'm just going to do one tension for each one of these elements. So the first one, leadership. So In this product model, moving towards this product thing, we find a very healthy tension which needs to be managed. The first side of that tension, which is true, is that leaders need to be responsible for results. On the other side, leaders need to enable their teams so their teams can get results. If you go too far one way, we get micromanagement, we get disempowerment of the teams. If we go too far the other way, teams have too much responsibility and they don't understand the context and there's nothing aligning them. So this is a healthy tension, and it is essential to enable teams to have the right context, the right value-based system and the context for any of these visions. Many in these agile workshops and things, we've created visions for companies for years. How do we create the product vision? It's one of the first things we do. We've got the product tree, we've got vision boarding, vision houses, all these things which are fantastic. But unless the context is given from leadership, then those things become meaningless and not used. And people go back to task taking. And that's not going to work in an innovative product environment. So this tension has to be balanced. So this is leadership. If you do have questions and things, please do add them to the chat or write them down, because I know there's a lot here. Moving on from, so this is the wisdom that comes out of if we do embrace these two things is we gain psychological safety, and team growth can grow into being more entrepreneurial. So this really enables the product team and product engineers, product designers, product managers to enable them to take risks, managed risks, and experiment. Without this ability to hold this leadership dynamic in tension, then I've heard so many stories, and we've been asked for many, many years, we've been asked can you sort these product owners out? They're not stepping up. They're not innovative. They just take orders. They're just working on lists. How can we get them to be more innovative? How can we get them to talk to our customers? Well, they won't do that unless this tension is held in a good way. So product. This is the main thing of this this talk. What we've got here is working in hierarchies and silos. We know that in our complex system we work in hierarchies, so we can't just pretend that we don't. So how do we manage that versus creating autonomy, entrepreneurship, and innovation? Those tensions have to be there. We're not just going to be throwing away the hierarchy. We're not going to be throwing away those silo teams. If we had been able to do that, we would have done it 15 years ago. We've been teaching this for literally a decade and a half, and still organizations are working in heavily siloed ways. So let's not pretend that they're going to be moving to this product operating model anytime soon. So how do we balance that in a product-based environment? If you're a product manager or you're responsible for delivering product, how are you going to create autonomy, entrepreneurship, and innovation in a silo-based model, which is almost impossible when you have to work in a silo? So there's got to be some learning there. There's got to be some skills that we develop to enable us to operate in the environments that we find our ways. And some of these things come with managing up, managing sideways, multi-stakeholder environment. There's lots of things there which we can do to relieve some of that stress. Next one is structure. Are we optimized for specialism or flow? When we have people who are very heavily identified with a certain skill set or a certain team, like I am a JavaScript developer, I am a database engineer, that's my identity, that's how I get employed, it's how I get paid. That is optimized for specialism. If I'm asked to work in a team that is optimized for flow, it means that even though I'm a developer, I might have to do some testing. These are well-known things, but again, we've got to, as individuals and as teams, balance these things to enable us to deliver products successfully. And so how do we create organizations and systems and cultures that honors that and allows people to grow and develop whilst not being so specialized? And the last thing I say here is something I realized a few years ago, is that people will always optimize to the level of their identity. So if you're a JavaScript developer, you're going to optimize JavaScript, right? If you're a search team guy, you're going to be optimizing search. But if you're the whole product person, well, then you optimize for product delivery. And so when we're looking at our cultures and our specialisms, how are we going to label people? How are we going to employ people so that we're optimizing the identity to the level of the product? Learning and development. So this is very interesting, close to my heart. Running a training company for the last 15 years, learning and development has been a massive part of my life. And really, there's this dynamic tension here between learning as a cost that we've got to pay for, and then we get some result out of it, which is very transactional, which is true. Training is a cost. It's what you get out of it, which you hope is value, versus the other tension is that learning is at the heart of what we do, and the work that we take on is merely an excuse to learn. And this is a radically different way about seeing our organizations. We want to learn about ourselves, we learn about our customers, about the domain we're in, and learning is actually the currency of our organization. And the work that we do merely enables us to learn, which is a very different shift. And we're not going to move to that straight away because people are looking at profit. We live in a capitalist society, and that's fair enough. So let's not ignore that. There aren't many learning organizations out there. There's a reason for that. We've known about learning organizations for way longer than I've been doing this role, 20 years, 30 years, I don't even know how long. And yet we hardly have any learning organizations. So let's not pretend. If we want to optimize and become really amazing at product, we have to learn. So do we want to put that in a transaction box, or do we want to try and make that the heart of what we're doing? And probably it's somewhere in between. So together or apart, this is the working the remotely in the office. So I'm not going to go into that too much, but it is a huge part of team structure and dynamics now. The main thing that I'm going to mention here is really about, I mean, let's take the forming, storming, norming, whatever it is, performing Tuckman's model, or any of these different team dynamics models. That has made the remote working has made that slow down. It has made it harder to become part of a team, and it has also made it harder to do things like team free team flow. I forget the name; it's just gone out of my head. Where people can swarm on things and work around different elements. So yeah, I'm not going to go too much.
Mobbing.
Sorry, say again.
Mobbing.
Yeah, mobbing. Yes, anywhere things like that become harder because we're not talking to each other unless there's a meeting, and a meeting is for a particular purpose. Whereas when you're off in the office, you can talk to the person next to you about what you had for breakfast that morning. We don't have a Zoom call to talk about what you had for breakfast this morning, and so we miss out on a lot of that stuff. And depending on your culture, you may have the first 15 minutes of the call talking about that stuff, or you may get straight into it. And it depends on where you live in the world and what's important to you. But yeah, so this is another big factor. And the last one I want to mention is AI. So many organizations have replaced a lot of knowledge workers with less knowledge workers who are more enabled with AI. And I just want to say something about this because many of those, or some of those organizations are now rehiring. Because as with all fads and booms and changes or massive revolutions, whichever one you call it, there's always an overhype at the beginning. And so AI is fantastic, no doubt about it. Absolutely incredible what it can do. But to replace everybody is unrealistic, at least at the moment. And so really what we want to look at here is how do we use AI to reduce cognitive load? And one of the big criticisms of the product operating model was that if people can take off anything from the backlog and they're full stack developers, this is massive cognitive load, really difficult for people to do that kind of thing and keep all that work in their head. But now we have AI to reduce cognitive load, which makes that product operating model a lot more effective. We've also got AI to help us with product insights and product data. We've also got it to help with customer insights, customer management, coding, all these kind of things. And so really it's about how do we reduce cognitive load and increase our performance. And that's fantastic. Not necessarily replacing people. Maybe maybe we do need less people, but just be really wary that many people are now hiring back. So, final thoughts. This is just really a bit of a summary. We need more clarity on product roles, mainly because we've got product owners, product managers, Uber product managers, um, uh, senior product managers. We've got so many different roles, and I'm really feeling that every organization I go into seems to have product roles which are defined differently than everywhere else. And maybe that doesn't matter, but it's creating a lot of confusion. And some of these product people do not have the right authority to be able to meet their own responsibilities that they're supposed to perform. And that creates an impossible role where people get burnt out with not the right ability to actually create product in the first place. So there's some real work that needs doing around product roles. AI we just talked around, which if you reduce cognitive load, we can have better team structures. So that's perhaps people hadn't realized that. And leaders provide tangible and explicit growth path. So this is with the enablement of that leadership dynamic. Again, we can start creating innovative product teams, but only once leadership can hold that balance in place and have proper delegation models that really are based around trust. And distributed thinking, that's really something that's been around for a long time. We really want to create the innovation in the teams. Iterate fast in your communities of practice, not just in your teams. That's something else which I think has been missed along the way. And the learning organization abundance mindset. So the abundance comes out of having a learning organization and vice versa. If we're very much in a scarcity mindset, then we very much limit the amount of learning and development that our staff have. And that then results in less learning and less development. So the very last thing I want to say is a plug. I don't want to talk too much because I'm not particularly a salesperson, but we have got Deeper Change now. Deeper Change has been born out of AWA, and it was really focusing on this idea of creating a new product organization and what it takes to do that. So we've got these two-part programs. This is how we're structuring our programs from now. Part one is normally more basic. It's about the learning about something, and then part two is a cohort program which takes people through actually doing the work, learning the work. And so we've got these product structure, which is really organizational change, L&D about how do you create an amazing learning and development capability. Coaching, if we don't have coaching for managers, then they're not really going to be able to embrace these dynamics which are needed for product development. And then now there's this awesome thing, which AI collaboration, which I've just started. It was really born out of a class which I ran, where normally it takes 4 hours for us to deliver a learning and development platform. And we instead collaborated for around about 45 minutes using ChatGPT. And we all learned stuff about how ChatGPT works, which we didn't know. And we managed to build the whole thing out in 45 minutes between us. And so now I want to create these monthly sessions of 2 hours where you can come along and we all share what we've learned about ChatGPT, and we actually base it around real world problems. And so we try and solve problems that people bring together collectively and learn how to use AI to do that. So that's another thing which I think would be pretty good for the community. That's the talk. I'm hoping that that's been useful, and that you can see that product has evolved. Agile has evolved away from the traditional roles of, or to say traditional roles. In Agile, we've always called the old project managers and uh, the old project way is traditional. Now it seems that Agile has become traditional, and we've moved on to something new, which really is around product development and service development. So I'm going to stop talking there. Thank you very much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and really nice to see your faces and hear your questions and things. So yeah, take care, everyone, and keep trying to make these organisations in our world a better place. See you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.